Have you ever been a victim of a scam? You're not alone. In 2019, there were 1.7 million fraud complaints recorded in the United States. That could be just the icing on the cake. One study suggested only 14% of scam cases are reported because they felt embarrassed, felt it was futile, or didn't know what to do. In this week's show, we're going to take a look at that. The evidence presented at the trial established that 65-year-old Anton Paul Drago orchestrated a large-scale Nigerian oil investment fraud scheme from at least 2004 through 2012. Drago told investors that the money they invested would be used for legal fees and business expenses to fund production, refinement, shipment of the crude oil from Nigeria to the Bahamas, along with co-conspirator Joseph Rizzuti, formerly of Panama City, Florida. Drago also told investors that the money they invested would fund an oil refinery in the Bahamas. Drago lied to investors about his background, falsely claiming that he was an engineer and an expert in the oil industry for over 30 years, working worldwide. He falsely told some investors that he was the grandson of the Shell Oil founder and heir to a $500 million trust of Nigerian oil investment deal. None of these claims were true. Today's show isn't about that. It's about the people he left in his destructive path of lies. 15 years ago, a single mother of two met a man who seemed to be Mr. Right before she was caught up in a whirlwind romance.
And it went really fast.
Yeah.
To where it went from, him showing up. I met him on a Saturday night, and then Sunday morning he showed up at brunch where I was taking the boys to brunch.
Really?
And, he was like, hey, and the boys immediately were like, he likes you. And I'm like, I hardly know the guy. Yeah. Plus, he was from out of town.
He seemed to love her children and doted on them.
It was more on wooing the boys. What would the boys like to do tonight? Next thing you know, he's showing up at the boys' soccer games, and cheering them on, and he just adopted the family. I was thinking, this is too good to be true.
There were some red flags.
And one of the key people was Bill McKelvey, invested with him, and then had his aunt and his friends and colleagues all invest with him too. And a couple of his colleagues really shouldn't have been investing. One was a single dad who had kids to take care of that were young, and he had put in his life savings. And I stepped in and I was like, that's not acceptable. Life savings is not acceptable for an investment. And remember also, this was 2005. People were making money hand over fist. Everybody's condos and homes and apartments were worth more than they really should have been worth, and the bubble was just huge, and nobody thought it would end. So people were taking money out of their pocket that they really should have been saving and investing. And one person in particular, I made him give the money back. I said, you have to give the money back. This isn't a good deal for this person. He's not thinking straight. And he did. But at that point also, he made sure I really didn't know who was investing from that point forward.
It was a simple act that she had done every year that opened her eyes. First was filing of her yearly taxes.
And I filed for both of us because we're married, right?
Right.
So I filed jointly, and I put his Social Security number on there.
Oh.
And I filed the taxes, and I didn't realize he was that off the radar. And bling, he lit up by the IRS.
And second, when she tried to buy a car.
We got a hit and run by a drunk driver, and we needed to get a new car.
Okay.
And he wanted to pay cash for it.
All right.
He wanted to just put down a chunk of money and pay for a car. And I'm like, well, that's just silly. I said, you're using all this money. Remember, now I'm his wife. You're using all this cash to buy a car when we really should, and the car's used, so you're buying somebody else's problems, so why aren't we buying a new car with a warranty and all that stuff, and we'll just go ahead. And he's like, well, I don't think I can buy one. I don't think I have credit. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have credit? By this time, he's like 63, 62. So we went to the car dealership, Mercedes, and I put mine in, and he put his in, and he was, and his social security number came back NA, not applicable. And I'm like, what does this mean? And they're like, well, he's never used his social security number credit. I'm like, well, we need to establish credit for him. This is crazy. He has no credit. This is like, how are we going to buy it? Because I was actually looking to buy a house. And I'm like, how are we going to buy a house if he has no credit? The IRS and the VA come and they come to my house and they take all the computers and all his documents. They said that they were running an investigation, and I said, is he a person of interest? And they said at the time, no, he's not a person of interest. He has data for a person of interest that we're looking at.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, okay, I'm like, well, then give them all the data they want.
Hind Insight is 2020.
2014, the feds come back. And now it's the VA, the IRS, and the FBI. They knocked on the door in the morning, and they took him away in handcuffs.
In total, he scammed nearly a dozen people from around the U.S. It can happen to anyone. It's not always gullible people who fall for this social catfish scamming.
I'm a smart, professional woman who plays by the books, and, you know, and by the way, I'm the perfect person to be catfished. You know, I'm
right.
focused on my kids, I'm focused on business, I'm focused on doing the right thing, building my reputation in the community, all that stuff. And that's what he was looking for, somebody that would believe in him, because nobody believed in him, and he had a sad, hard story, and, you know, and they all do. They all have this victim story.
That's right.
You know, I was adopted. He says, I'm adopted. Nobody loved me. I went into the military at a young age. Lie. I fought in Vietnam and I tried to be the best person I could be. Lie. It was like all these things, one after another. And you're thinking, because you're a good person and you're play by the book, you're like, oh, that guy needs a break. You know, he's a good person. He's a nice person. And this is where they pull you in.
Right.
They pull on you being a glasses half full person. You're a person
That's
who
right.
believes, you know, that you want to give people an opportunity to succeed, that you work hard and you're busy doing a lot of things, so you
Right.
don't have time to like dig into the minutia. And he also made my life very pleasant. But the big thing is that I learned from it is a con man needs two things to survive. They need people around them that legitimize them.
That's it. That's the hook.
And that's the hook.
The hook.
They need a good, solid person by their side, and then a small group of friends that are all good, solid people. And he had those. When I first met him,
Yep.
he brought down friends from Oregon, and these were good people. One of them was a sheriff. One of them worked for UPS. Another one, nice people. Just grounded, good, salt of the earth people. You're like, well, he can't be so bad. He's got friends like this, right?
That's right.
So those were his legitimizing,
Yeah.
that was the legitimizing group. And then the second was he uses that legitimizing group to move him into circles that he can prey on. And my sons went to private school. You know, he was at all their games, not rooting the kids on, but that's what you saw. He was looking for the other parents that were rooting their kids on that owned major corporations or were involved in big deals and things like that he could get close to and buddy up to. And that's what he was doing.
To make matters worse, a little-known law made her situation worse.
No law in Nevada, and there are in many, many other states,
Right.
that says when your spouse goes to jail, that you can automatically divorce them.
There's no law.
There's no law in Nevada that says that. So I had to divorce him the good old-fashioned way. He had to participate.
Oh my
And he
God.
didn't want to participate. He didn't want to, he postponed trial dates. He went out of his way to he went out of his way to like just throw as much crap into the system as he could to make this divorce process as long as it could be. It took me over a year to get divorced from him, like a non-stop over a year. And when it finally happened and we had because all we needed was one court date, okay? One trial date in front of the judge. All we could do was, by the time I got to that point, he had said that he'd given me, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry. He didn't. That he had given me, he'd paid for this house. He didn't. That he did all these things. So I had to have a checkoff list. Well, I had to bring in my first husband, the father of my boys, had to come in and testify for me that all the jewelry and everything I had either was from our first marriage or I bought on my own. So when the judge saw that my first husband had to come in to testify against the second husband, it was kind of crazy. And so he finally saw it roll out and he gave me the divorce, but he told me, he goes, don't do anything crazy, like go get married again. I was like, that ain't gonna happen. But he's like, he can appeal in 30 days. And did he not appeal?
He appealed.
He appealed. I was able to hold my head up high because when people would look at me and go, really? You didn't know anything that was going on? Really? And I have to explain to them that the FBI went back to 74 when they were investigating him. They found like a bounce check in 1974. They went back all the way to 74 when they were investigating him. They went back to 97 when they were investigating me. Because I was
you were investigated
I
too.
was equally investigated right along with him. And they couldn't find a single thing on me. And I look at most people and I'm like, can you go back 20 years in your life? Or at the time it was, what was that? Yeah, it was 20 years. Can you go back 20 years in your life by the IRS, the FBI, and the VA and come out clean?
65-year-old Anton Paul Drago was convicted in March 2016 of all 10 counts of indictment after an 8-day jury trial and was sentenced to 25 years in jail. In addition to the terms of imprisonment, Drago was sentenced to pay $2.3 million in restitution and to serve 5 years of supervised release following his prison term. Today, online makes it easy to do a little research on the person you date or plan to do business with. Do your homework to prevent heartache later. To report fraud or scam, visit usa.gov/stop-scams-frauds. Keep your eyes open. Thanks for joining us.